Hey everyone, this is Ashley Thomas. She's a job search coach and certified resume strategist with Right Step Resume. She was a recruiter for 20 years and she hired across various fields. She won multiple resume writing awards and was named JobScan's top 15 jobs for search experts to follow on LinkedIn's Top Voice. And she's just going to talk about interviews.
All right, good deal. So I like to be interactive. So if you guys have questions, you can put them in the chat and I will stop periodically just to see if anybody has questions, and then we'll have questions at the end. So tell me where everybody is checking in from. Do you have access to the chat?
Yeah, we all have access to the chat.
Yep, so I can see it, but I wanted to make sure everybody else could access it. So while you guys are getting your comments in, I want to talk to you about so interview breakthrough. We're going to talk about ways that you can ace your next interview, whether it's virtual, in person, or a combination of both. So first in this session, you're going to learn how to prepare for your in-person or virtual job interview, regardless of your career level, because I know some of you have jobs and some of you may not. And then I'm going to give you some tips for making a great first impression. And then also we'll talk about some common interview mistakes that I will share strategies for you to avoid those mistakes again, so you can ace your interview. Now, first and foremost, there is an interview myth. People think that just because you have experience, that is enough to get you a job. Well, actually, it's not. Experience alone does not guarantee you a job. You have to be able to communicate your value and show how you're able to solve that employer's problem. And so most people use the interview as sort of a way to recap information from their resume. They're very straight up and down. They don't add personality, and they're afraid to be their authentic selves, when actually recruiters really want to get to know you, because the more we know about you and your personality, the more we can sort of place you on certain departmental teams, on certain projects, and assign you to certain positions. So don't be afraid to be yourself and really just show up as you, as much as you feel comfortable doing that. Now, so the truth about interviewing is that you must do a lot of research before you even go into the interview. You never want to accept an interview blindly. So you want to learn as much as you can learn about the company, about the team members, about the product, whatever it is that that company is known for. You want to make sure that you have a good understanding of that, including the problem. So if they have an issue with sales, or if they have a certain product that they need to promote, or if you're in IT and they have certain systems that need to be maintained, you have to understand how your experience and expertise serves as the answer for that employer's problem. And then you want to be able to communicate your unique value. So those things that you do really well, any success that you've had. So if you've had accomplishments, if you were able to, again, increase sales, if you were able to drive traffic to a website, if you were able to improve a process or make money, save money, anything like that, you want to be able to communicate that with confidence in your interview. And then you have to remember, first and foremost, that the interview is a two-way conversation. So you are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second here. All right, so the first, when I said researching and networking, you want to make sure that you start with the end in mind. Give me
Ashley, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was trying to calm my kids down. They're barking because somebody's cutting their yards at an odd time. So sorry about that. So where do you start when you're researching and interviewing? So I'll give you some tips about that. The first place that I want you to start is with the company website. So at the company's website, you have to remember, though, that they're only going to promote that information that is good, that puts them in a good light, right? They're going to show their successes. They're going to show the bright side of working for the company. So you really want to take in this information carefully, but really you can get an idea of kind of what the team looks like. You want to go to the leadership page. If they have a page that says our team, you want to learn about, who you could be potentially working with. You want to look at the people and see, do they look like me? Is there anyone on the team that could represent me when it comes to the concerns that my community may have? Do they align with my values? Does this company have a mission statement that I believe in? You want to learn about their products. You want to snoop around and get as much information as you can from that company's website. Then to get the real story about the employee, like, just maybe an extension of what you may have already learned, you'll search online. You'll look at different websites. So you want to, analyze the information that's out there. Do they have reviews or something on Glassdoor, on Indeed? Do they have them really on their company's Google page? You want to see, what are the customers saying about this company? You also want to look at if they've been in the news recently. I don't know if you guys remember, but Wells Fargo went through a whole entire really just firestorm concerning their company's brand because, word got out that they were doing things with customer accounts that they shouldn't have been doing. And there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of employee mistreatment and a lot of pushing them to do things that weren't necessarily done with integrity. So if you have an issue with a company, typically it's going to be in the news if it's a really big company, it's a really big story, but you may have to dig a little deeper when it's maybe your mom and pop or maybe your smaller businesses. So you definitely want to look at those reviews to see what the customers are saying, see what that overall experience is like. And also look at social media, see what people are saying. Because people aren't remaining quiet about things about companies these days. So as much as you can try to absorb or learn about this company prior to the interview, you can ask some very meaningful questions when you're talking to your potential supervisors, when you're talking to leaders at the company, and when you're speaking with recruiters. So not always can you take the reviews and say this is 100% accurate. Look at the pros and cons. Look for different themes that you may see. If everybody is talking about they work long hours and they don't treat their employees right, then there probably is some sort of truth to it. But you also have to look at, sometimes people give reviews when they're disgruntled, so they may be upset about something. And what you may love about a supervisor may be the exact same that someone else hates. So you have to make sure that you're taking in this information collectively and from different sources so that you can make the best decision possible. Now we'll talk about some job interview basics. So before we jump into that, does anyone have any questions about where to find information from the reviews? Any questions there? And I will take silence as a no in the chat. So let me know if you have those questions. Keep them coming in the chat. But really for the interview basics, I'll say it again, interviewing is a two-way street. You are interviewing that company just as much as they are interviewing you. So be sure to also ask questions. It's not just about the company firing questions off at you and making you nervous and trying to find out more juicy details about you. You need to do the same thing for the employer. The worst thing that you can do is say no at the end of the interview when someone asks if you have questions. Regardless of how much information the interviewer has given you, you always need to ask questions. Interviews can be either virtual or in person, or they can be throughout your interview process. It could be a combination of both. So you may start off with a phone interview or a video interview with the recruiter, and then you may lean into an in-person interview with the hiring team, or you may have a panel interview. So standard interviews are typically you interviewing with the hiring manager or you interviewing with the recruiter. But if you're over the phone or on video, there may be other parties involved in the conversation. So be sure to get clarity about who you're interviewing with and try to get their names, because again, that's going to help with your research, because research doesn't stop just because you get the interview. You want to continue to research the information that you've been given throughout the interview process. And you want to be able to, look at those individuals on LinkedIn. You want to find out as much information as possible so you can know that you're making the right decision or the best decision for you in your career. So some common interview questions that you may come across is the tell me about yourself interview question. If you've interviewed at all at this point, especially when you get beyond, say, maybe your customer service or your part-time positions, people will typically ask you in the interview to tell them about yourself. So in order to do that, you're not going to recap things about your childhood or, things that you like to do for fun. That's not really what that question is for. It is really to gain more insight into how you interviewed, or how you performed as an employee, the type of experience that you've gained. You want to tell them things that are relevant to the job that you're applying to. So keep that focused on maybe just a brief recap of what, how you started in that particular field and what has prepared you for that position that you're applying to or that you're interviewing for at that time. And you want to be able to give them some examples of success that you've had that's a relevant fit or a match for the position that you're targeting. They may also ask you why they should hire you. Here is an opportunity, even though in the back of your head, you may be thinking, well, I just need a job. I need a paycheck right now. That's why you should hire me. You should hire me because I applied and I'm qualified. While that may be true, you want to focus your responses on things that help set you apart from other applicants. So things like, again, if you've improved processes, if you've saved money, if you've made money, if you've built relationships, if you have salvaged a relationship that may have been damaged before, but you were able to repair that relationship. Those are the types of things that you want to talk about when you're sharing why someone should hire you. And then your salary expectations. This could be a very tricky question, but with research and with your thorough understanding of the position, you should be able to give within a range. So maybe you'll say, I want to make 35 to 40,000, or maybe, you say, I want to make 100 to 110. But that's because you've done your research, you've visited websites like salary.com, Glassdoor, and you've gotten an understanding of what somebody with your skills, your expertise, your knowledge, your industry, you want to do all of those comparisons so that you can understand what somebody like you should be able to ask for. So you'll get a minimum, a median, and then also a maximum range for someone with your skill set on those sites. So be able to answer that question. Now, in certain states, it has become law because of the Pay Transparency Act, where you have to reveal what the pay range is for the position. But that doesn't give you an idea of what's budgeted for that position. So even though the range may extend from 70,000 up to 150, they may only be budgeted to pay you 115. So you want to have this conversation as early on in the process as possible. Have a number in your mind, or at least a range of about, $10,000 to $15,000 difference. Have that range in your mind already so that you know what your walkaway number is. So if you need to make a minimum of 70,000 to live and they're only offering you 55, then you know that may not be the position for you. Or you may ask whether or not that pay is negotiable or whether it's based on experience or something like that. But be able to give a range based on the research that you've done. And then another common question is, what are your weaknesses? So a lot of us are really good about talking about the things that we're really good at, but then we struggle to talk about our weaknesses. And so a weakness, even though it may sound negative and then the strengths part of it sounds positive, the weakness, you can turn that into a positive by talking about something that you may have overcome from the past. So maybe this is something that you used to struggle with. Like for me, I used to get really nervous in speaking in front of crowds, or maybe I was at one point in my career, I was told that, oh, you talk too fast, right? So those were things that I needed to work on. So when I share what my weakness is, I talk about those things that I struggled with before and the steps that I've taken to improve on those things. So remember, anytime you're talking about your weaknesses, you want to quickly address the weakness and then move on to how you've actually improved from that time. Because what recruiters and hiring managers are actually looking for is not that you maybe talk down on yourself or that you have low self-esteem, but that you're able to recognize when things need to be improved and that you're open to taking the steps necessary to get better at your job or to make things run more smoothly. All right, so those are the common questions that you'll get in basically just about every interview. But there are also some very common mistakes that I see quite a bit, and you need to be mindful of these things. So when it comes to tardiness, you want to be on time for your interview, and especially if it's a virtual interview, you want to log in early enough to where if there's technical difficulties, you can handle that very, very quickly, get over it, calm your nerves, and rock it out in your interview. But if you're late, you're already, if you're rushing and you're already on edge, that can impact how you perform in the interview. So you want to be really careful there. Like I said, technology issues, really messy backgrounds. If you're on a virtual interview and then, you've got stuff all over in the background, it can be a distraction. So you want to keep your background nice, neat, and tidy. It doesn't matter really what's going on in the front of you, as long as what's in that camera view is something that you're able to quickly, adjust. You have a confined space. It doesn't matter if you're in a corner. It does not matter at all. You also want to be free from distractions. Sometimes you can't avoid that. You can't control whether or not your neighbor decides to cut grass in the middle of your presentation. You also can't control all the time if there's power outages and things like that, but things like making sure that the TV is off, making sure that your phone is on do not disturb. Those are things that you can typically control that. If you're going to an in-person interview, a lot of times you're being judged on your attire. It's easy to get away with that kind of stuff when you're on a virtual interview, but you also want to be mindful that if there's an emergency that happens and you have to run away and maybe you have to get the door, or maybe something's on fire, whatever it is, and you have to jump up, and then for some reason you're not dressed at the bottom, you only decided to wear your shirt, that could be very embarrassing. So you want to always dress from head to toe, because you never know what may happen even when there's a virtual situation. But in-person interviews can be a little bit tricky too when it comes to what to wear, because you want to look like you belong with that particular organization. So you want to look like one of the team members that are already working there. So it's okay to ask a recruiter, what is the attire? Because not always do you need to wear professional business attire. You may not need to wear a suit and tie or, a dress suit or something. You may not need to do that. It may be okay for you to wear a polo and khakis, or just a cardigan and a nice skirt. It may be okay for you to do that. So ask those questions to make sure that you're not overdressed or underdressed. You also have to consider your audience. Who will you be speaking to? Because of course you're going to kick it up a notch if you're talking to someone who's very high up in the organization. Maybe it's an executive or maybe a department head. So you may want to, again, kick it up a notch. Then you want to consider any safety concerns. If you're doing a phone interview or a video interview in your car, you want to make sure that it's parked. A lot of times I would have people say, well, I have to sneak on my lunch break, or, I'm going to be in transit. Is that something that's going to be okay? And usually I just make sure that they at least have a headset, that they're able to talk to me hands-free with minimal distractions. Typically I will ask them to, to reschedule, but in some cases where I'm only expecting to talk to them maybe 5 or 10 minutes, it may be okay. But you want to always consider safety. And then again, not asking questions. That's a really big interview mistake, because what happens when you've worked somewhere and there was an issue and then you're leaving that company because of that issue? Maybe you were micromanaged. Maybe they didn't have the processes in place. But when you go to that next interview, you want to ask questions to ensure that you're not getting yourself back into the same situation that you're trying to escape. And then not following up and saying thank you after an interview can hurt you as well, because a lot of times in the interview, your nerves are going, you forget to ask certain things. So following up and letting the person that interviewed you know that you're appreciative of the interview, saying thank you, it gives you an opportunity to continue the conversation. And so maybe you're able to share something that your nervous brain forgot to say in the interview. So make sure that you keep those lines of communication open. Just pay attention to when you follow up. You want to give it at least a week. And that's my rule of thumb with everything. You want to give it at least 5 business days or 7 calendar days to make sure that the interview team has had enough time to assess your information. And when you're in doubt of how soon you should follow up, you can always ask, when should I follow up with you? Or when should I expect to hear back? And then you wait for that time to come and pass before you follow up. And then also not asking for feedback. If you've gone through an interview, you didn't get selected, but you felt like you did a really good job, you really vibed with the team members that were interviewing you, you can ask for feedback so that you can make corrections or adjustments along the way so that when you interview with that company again, or you interview with another company, you can keep that information in mind. All right, so some questions that you can ask after your interview would be, how has this position evolved since it was first created? And this question is very important for if you're working for a startup, or maybe you're working for a new department, or maybe this position is something that didn't always exist, or they modified a position. You want to find out how this position came about, because that is going to help you understand whether or not this job is going to, again, put you back into a situation that you're trying to escape, or whether it's really just a dead-end job. Then you want to know, how is success measured in this role? Because if you don't know what is considered good performance or bad performance, then you really don't know how to keep track of these things, and and ensure that you're staying on top of your own expectations. Are they setting you up for success in the position? So you want to understand how you're being measured. And then you also want to ask, what is the top priority for this position in the next 3 months? This will give you an idea of your work-life balance, whether or not you're going to be working a whole lot of hours, if it's a new project and maybe a new territory, or, they've accepted a new contract, or they got some new projects in, or whatever going on. That may tell you that you may be working some extra hours. You may be doing a lot of travel. You may not get to see your family as much as you want to. And if that's something that's important to you, it will give you an idea of what to expect in the future. And then additionally, asking about the next steps in the process. That is something that you really want to do. It kind of helps you soothe your nerves and to manage your expectations, so that you're not worrying about, well, it's been a couple days, I haven't heard anything, and you're really just in limbo, because that's not knowing puts you in a very, very uncomfortable spot. And so it gives you like a realistic time frame to look forward to. So if that's a week, if they tell you, well, it normally will take 1 week, but we have some vacations coming up, so it may be another 2 to 3 weeks before we're able to get back to you. We have other candidates to interview. Then you know how to to manage your feedback, and so that you're not following up, or manage your follow-up. You're not following up too soon, or you're not following up at all, right? And then you want to, you can also ask them, what's the projected start date? This will help you decide whether or not you need to go ahead and take that last minute vacation, whether or not you're ready to start, especially if you're relocating. It may be an opportunity for you to negotiate your start date, because that is something that you can negotiate. There are a lot of things that you can negotiate with your new job outside of money itself. So, do you have time to give proper notice to your current employer? So you want to manage those expectations. And then you want to know if there's a structured orientation process. Are they just going to throw you to the wolves and expect you just to catch on and pick up? Or do you have that person that you can sort of lean on? Or do you have a manual or some SOPs that you can refer to help you carry out your day-to-day function of the job, so that you can be successful? So, just remember, whatever questions you're asking, or whatever questions you need to ask, who the point person is, generally where to go. Even something as simple as knowing where the bathroom is, or where the break room is, or knowing what's the proper lot for you to park in, depending on where your building is. Those are the types of things that you want to sort of, to ask and get that out of the way, because it can cause a lot of stress on your first day. All right, so I mentioned that you do need to, to follow up and say thank you. You want to send this via email ASAP. Some people like to still send things via snail mail, especially if you do handwritten notes. You may want to do that, but you want to get that going within 48 hours. Don't let too much time pass by after your interview, because things can move pretty quickly in the process. This is why I always say, opt for the email thank you note first. And you want to personalize those thank you notes for every single interviewer. So if more than one person interviewed you, you don't want to do a blanket thank you to everybody. You want to make sure that you're getting the names of the people that are interviewing you, and at least their position title. Sometimes people will give business cards, or sometimes they'll be copied on an email. Just make sure that you're sending an individual message, because they're individual people. And if they work in separate departments, or not, or they work on, separate initiatives, you may have learned something different from each one of them, and you want to draw attention to that you were actually listening. That's why it's important to also take notes during your interview. And then you want to make sure that you're addressing the right person in your thank you note. The same as you would pay attention to that in your cover letter and in your application, making sure that you're sending things to the appropriate person. You want to address the right person and the right company when it comes to saying thank you. And then you'll still check for those typos or any spelling errors that you may have, especially when it comes to people's names. I can't tell you, even though I feel like I have a very easy to remember and easy to spell name, my name gets spelled wrong all the time. People spell it ELY for whatever reason. And it is something that I feel like, okay, my name is right there in my signature. My name is right there on LinkedIn. You have multiple places to find out how to spell my name. And so those little details, especially when you've put on your resume that you pay very, very close attention to detail, right? But that's a little detail that you missed, that it was Jennifer with one N or, Sarah with no H on the end. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of those things. And then again, asking for feedback. Not all the time will they be able to give you very specific feedback, like what you did wrong or, or whatever, but it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to try to get as much information from the interviewer as possible. Because not knowing where you stand in the process, in this process or any process moving forward, it really can, do a number on your self-esteem. Especially when you think you're doing a great job and nobody's told you that, maybe you're talking too fast, or maybe you don't answer the questions right away, or maybe you don't come across as confident, or maybe you're just not ready for the opportunity and need additional training. So asking those questions of your interviewer can help you understand sort of the adjustments that you need to make along the way so that you can continue on and continue striving for those positions and then ultimately ace your interview to get the job offer, because that's the whole point of the resume, is to get the interview, but the interview is actually for you to secure the job offer. So again, always try to find out if you can get some more information or intel about any shortcomings that you may have regarding your interviews. All right. Any questions?
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
So I was wondering, when asking questions to our interviewers, is there any question that you think would be like an automatic, oh, we're not going to hire this person, or just that would kind of get me off of their radar?
Sometimes it's timing, right? So if you say it's your first, most times you have about maybe 3-4 interviews, right? So the first interview may be with the recruiter, then you have another interview with the hiring manager, and then you may have another meeting with, say, some team members, right? So you want to pay attention to your audience. So you don't want to ask the hiring manager questions that are HR related, because that's something that the recruiter should be able to answer for you. So you wouldn't ask a hiring manager about a certain company policy on something. They may know the answer to that, but that's really not their lane. They know it from a more broader standpoint. You also don't want to jump in your first interview already asking about vacation time. So if you have a pre-planned vacation, it's okay for you to mention that, but you want to do that later in the process after you find out that you've already gotten the offer. You don't want anything to distract from the fact. Get the offer first, and then you can ask whatever weird questions you feel like you want to ask. But mainly, it's just making sure that the questions that you ask are appropriate for the person that you're asking them to. So you wouldn't ask, you can ask the recruiter about details of the job, but as far as the day-to-day specific stuff, you want to keep that with the person that you'll be doing the day-to-day work with. And so that's more than likely the hiring manager. The recruiter is going to be able to answer your questions more about process, more about pay, but it's too early in the process for you to start trying to negotiate your salary in the very first interview if an offer has not been made. So just some examples of things that may not be appropriate at certain
Thank
phases
you.
of the process. You're welcome. All right, so Megan said, would you recommend cold calling or emailing? Can you be specific? Are you meaning just if a position isn't posted and you want to just cold reach out to someone to ask about opportunities? Is that what you mean? Okay, yeah. So if a position isn't posted, it's okay for you to cold email somebody, but you don't want to always reach out to people asking something of them. The goal is to try to build a relationship with them. So you want to research the person before you gather as much intel as possible. So if you have someone who could be potentially a hiring manager, say he's a customer service manager or she's a customer service director, and you want to reach out to them about a customer service opportunity, you would want to research that person a little bit, find a common denominator. You want to something that you guys have in common. Did you graduate from the same school? Have you worked for the same company before? Did you see that they had a position posted already for this type of position in the past? And you're just asking when this new position, when another position will be posted or when they would continue or, restart their hiring process, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you ask, it does not create work for them. So for instance, when I was recruiting, I would have people reach out to me and say, hey, here's my resume. What kind of job should I apply for? Well, that's putting work on me because now I have to review your information and kind of try to guess what types of positions you want. So when you're asking something of someone, make it easy for them to help you. So if you want to know, say the status of your application, you can tell them when you applied, you can give them a specific rec number. You can also share who you may have spoken to in the past that maybe you just can't reach, because what you don't want to do is reach out to a bunch of people, cold emails, and have them all chasing down the same answer for you. That's happened before where 4 of us on the recruiting team got the same question from a candidate, right? And now all of us are chasing down this answer, and it wasted a lot of our time because none of us knew that the other person was looking for this information. So yes, it is okay that you cold call or email. I prefer email because email is a lot easier for people to respond when it's convenient for them. And then also you're not catching them, off guard. So if you're asking a question, they have time to go and research that answer for you. So yeah, it's very appropriate, but just make sure that whatever you're sending to them or asking of them is something that can move you forward, keep the conversation going, and it comes from a place of give and take, not take and take. Did that answer your question? You're welcome. I see.
I have another question. Would the length of our interview kind of determine anything? Like, if we have an interview that ends like really short and prompt, is that like a bad sign, or is it kind of like doesn't matter? Versus if we have like a really lengthy interview where we're just talking and talking, is that a pretty good sign, or does the length not really matter?
So the answer is it depends. I've had good interviews go really, really quickly, and we move them through the process very quickly. Or sometimes I made up my mind that I was moving them forward to the next process and, maybe 5-10 minutes. Whereas other times it lasted 5 or 10 minutes because they weren't good. Or they weren't a match, for the position. And then there were times where the conversation was an enjoyable conversation, but that doesn't solidify the fact that they're getting the job, because you have to remember there's one opportunity and there may be multiple people applying to it. And just as human beings, we tend to talk to people more that we like. So just because I like you, it doesn't mean that you're the absolute greatest fit for the role, but you can use that to your advantage. If you had a great conversation with someone and you still did not get the job, know that that person may remember you for the next opportunity, or they may have something that's at a lower level or a higher level, or maybe in another department, and you can maximize or optimize your that relationship. So you can build upon that. So you can be like, hey, remember me? We talked on such and such and such. I had such a great conversation with you. You can use that to to restart the conversation with them, and maybe they can you can ask, can you share some information about that other department. So don't always take rejection as a negative thing, because remember, there may be hundreds of people applying to that one opportunity. They can only give it to one person. So that means the other 100, they have to get a rejection letter. So it doesn't mean that you're not qualified for the position. They just had to make a decision to pick one person, but that doesn't mean that you'll be skipped over the next time there's an opportunity there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have one.
Okay.
In terms of asking the interviewer questions, is asking when you'd find out if you got the job or not a bad question? Like,
No, it's okay to ask. Just make sure that, so for instance, you interview with the recruiter first, or maybe you have a quick screen with the hiring manager. At the close of that, when they ask if you have any questions, or if they don't give you an opportunity, just say, hey, real quick, I have a question. When should I expect to hear back? Or when do when do you plan to make the final decision for this position? Or what does the process look like moving forward? Those are all acceptable questions to ask in your interview. Because, remember, it's just setting the stage for what you should expect. And it sort of calms your nerves so that you're not worrying about not getting a response within 2 to 3 days when they've already told you that it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You guys are asking some good questions. Keep them coming.
Sorry again. Is there any
Okay.
tips that you would have regarding different career path interviews? Because like I know certain types of like fields, like doing interviews for law, interviews for consulting, or interviews for like STEM careers. Do you think, in a sense, like the way you should answer the questions should be the same? Or is it kind of like based on the job, based on the career field that you're applying for, you should try to make your answers or the way that you answer questions more geared to that field?
Yeah, so any answers that you give should be relevant to the job that you're applying to. But the overall sense, because I've recruited in manufacturing, automotive manufacturing, medical devices manufacturing, legal, healthcare nonprofit, education, all of the structure of the interviews, they're basically the same. I'm asking the same types of general questions, and then I may have more behavioral based questions that are directly related to the job at hand. So it doesn't matter to me whether you're working on the factory floor or whether or not you're a legal advisor that will be taking consults to decide whether or not that firm will take on that person's case. I still want to know about your competency as it relates to the position. So any question that you're asked, you should be looking for answers that directly tie in to that particular type of position. But yeah, the framework of tell me about yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, how much money you want to make. The framework for those questions will always be the same. And any behavioral based type question where they're asking, tell me about a time or describe a time where you did this, or, or something along those lines, then you want to use either the STAR, CAR, or PAR formats. They're all basically the same. It's just one is situation, task, action, result. The other one is a problem, action, and result. The other one is a cause, action, or result. So they all basically are looking for you to tell, what was the situation, what you did, and what happened. That framework is going to be the same. However, your answer is just going to be geared toward the specific position or industry that you're applying to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a quick question.
Mhm.
Okay, so I feel like a lot of fields, like especially for those in undergrad who are trying to go to grad school, they always have a lot of like requirements they have to meet. Like for example, like for people who are trying to go to any med related things, they have to get like clinical hours, or people in law obviously have to get some type of like roles. I'm just wondering how you can go about these with just being like an undergrad student with maybe like experience in like certain clubs, but I'm just saying like getting higher roles and getting roles like this. How would you go about that?
Yeah, so you want to pay attention to the qualifications. So if they're asking for several things that you don't have, then that's probably not the right level of position for you to be applying to. So my rule of thumb and what I tell job seekers and clients to do is if you meet at least 75% of the qualifications for the role, go ahead and apply to it, because that means that you'll have some bit of learning curve involved in that position. But if you meet all 100% of the qualifications, what is there to learn? You already know how to do everything, right? So that may be something that you're overqualified for. So the expectation is not always that somebody checks every single box, because some things, you can be taught. Like for instance, if they want you to have knowledge in a particular system, well, if it's something that they use in a way that you can easily learn that within your first couple of months on the job, then that may be an exception that they're willing to make. So it really depends on how important that qualification is, whether or not you need to have it. So something like a clinical, I don't see that being something that they will be willing to budge on, because that is the core foundation of what that job should be able to do. But maybe they want you to have a certain certification, or maybe they want you to have a certain number of years of experience. So maybe they ask for 3 years and you only have maybe a year and a half, but you have pretty much everything else. I would say go ahead and apply to those opportunities and let the company tell you no, and not go ahead and rule yourself out. Some studies have shown that women are more likely to not apply for roles when they don't meet all of the qualifications, whereas men are more likely to apply when they only meet half of them. So again, you miss out on every chance you don't take.
That makes sense. What if you're just like trying to go for like just a place to learn or just ask someone to like teach you? Would you go about that differently? Like, would you do the same thing, like cold emailing and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I would still cold email because the most important part of you getting another job is the relationships that you build. I've gotten several positions, never having applied for those positions. When I did apply, it was for a formality just to get my information into the system. But I built relationships with people who did what I did, who did what I wanted to do, and worked for companies that I wanted to work, right? So once you build those relationships with people, it doesn't mean that you have to go out for, with drinks. You don't have to go to church with them or, or whatever the case. You just want to have a good enough rapport to where they see your name and you can at least give them a short scenario to remind them of where they know you from and they know you, right? Or they're familiar with with your name. So if you're networking and you're sharing information with people about, your desire to branch into a new field or get experience in a new area, they may be able to set you up with some job shadowing opportunities, some volunteer projects, or some consulting work that can get you the experience that you need. But you wouldn't know any of that if you're just looking on job boards and applying for positions. You want to infuse the human element into the process and get as much information as you want. The same way that you would sort of research and, ask a friend about a guy that you may be interested in, or maybe a girl that you want to date, whatever the case may be. If you're interested in something, you've got someone that you reach out to ask questions, to pry a little bit, and you want to use your networking context for that same thing to get information that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. And that's how cold emails and cold calls to introduce yourself can be very beneficial, especially if you can make a good enough impression to where they want to keep the conversation going. I would say go for it, but expect nothing. Because when you have your expectations like, oh, they're going to respond to me, they're going to give me this great opportunity and whatever, and then you get let down when they ghost you, when they don't respond to you, when they leave you on red. And understand that you may have to make yourself familiar to somebody over a period of time, and that it's not, building those relationships isn't always instant. You didn't just wake up one day, at least not past childhood. You didn't just wake up one day and then somebody's your best friend. Like, they had to grow to that. You had to get to know them. You had to, you sat back and watched them for a little bit. You researched them to figure out, who do they hang with? Do they get in trouble? Are they, is this somebody that I should be aligned with? And so the same thing should be happening with who you build your networking relationships with. You want to make sure that you're, kind of studying what's going on and seeing ways that not only they can help you, but ways that you can help them as well. And that will, help you stay front of mind when there are opportunities for people who have less experience. And those, they can reach out to you really even before those positions ever get posted.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I kind of have a question, not necessarily related to interviews, but trying to kind of like resumes and cover letters.
Mhm.
Should we be making those personalized to the jobs that we're applying for? Or should it kind of be like we should have a general resume that we just use when applying for like all positions, or a cover letter that we use for all positions?
Yeah, so you'll have, so general one size fits all resumes and cover letters typically don't work because the resume needs to be tailored to that particular opportunity, because you want to only mention those things in your resume or your cover letter that can help support your candidacy. So if you're applying for a position, you may put the position on there that you had a part-time, customer service role, or or whatever, or maybe you were an, a front desk assistant, or, or something along those lines, right? You can leave that entry there on your resume or on your application, but you don't want to talk a whole lot about it if it doesn't have anything to do with what you would be doing as a nurse. right? Does that make sense? So you would try to pull your transferable skills from those jobs that are less relevant. So while you may not be operating a cash register as a nurse, you will be working with patients. So there's a lot of customer service involved in that. So you want to focus on your ability to help people, your ability to keep things safe. You know, those are the types of things that you want to focus on. But then if you take the resume and make it general, if you apply to something, then I need to be able to look at your resume and tell without a doubt why you are applying for this position. I need to see those relevant skills. And if you haven't pointed those out for me, I'm not going to make that decision for you. Even though I can kind of guess, well, if she did this, she probably is, you know, has been able to do this, right? But I can't make that decision always. So you don't want to leave it up to the person that's reviewing your information to make that decision. You want to present yourself as such. It's just like, you know, again, I talk about food a lot because I'm greedy. I like to eat. So just think about it. If you're going to an Italian restaurant for their, you know, because they're known for pasta, why are they trying to sell me a burger? You know, like, yeah, that's good and that's food and I do like burgers, but that's not what I'm here for. So you have to consider your resume in that same way. If they're looking for someone in marketing, they're looking for a marketing resume to go along with it. And a general resume or a general cover letter doesn't do it. So that's why I say you want to personalize everything and tailor it to that specific job opportunity. Now, you can have a specific job target without having to change stuff over and over again. So say you're, you know, you're applying for the same medical research positions, right? Then your information is generally going to be the same because you're applying for those same types of positions. But if you flip and then you start working, you know, applying for positions that involve direct patient care, then of course that's going to be a different conversation. So taking that medical research resume and applying to a clinical, you know, or type setting job, that's not going to make a whole lot of sense because the information is going to be similar, but not as relevant as it would be had you tailored your information. So it's not a complete rewrite. I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. They think they need to have a separate resume for every single thing they apply to. And no, if your foundational resume, meaning the first resume that you started with, if that foundational resume is tailored toward that specific job target or type, you should only be making minor changes each time you apply to the position. And then there may be some that you don't make any changes at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any in the chat.
Okay, sorry, very last question.
Go ahead.
Okay, is there a limit to the amount of time that you think, let's say, if I had a job for only like a few weeks or something, would that still be something I should put on a resume? Or is it like, doesn't really matter how long you hold the job?
So the first question that you have to ask when you're deciding what to put on your resume and what to leave off is it relevant? So if the job that you had for just a couple weeks, if that was something like maybe a part-time or contract opportunity or something that just didn't work out while you were in school, you can explain that. But if it's relevant to what you're, you know, to what you're doing, I would say there, you know, just weigh the pros and cons. Like, does this take away any of the relevant experience I may have? You know, especially if everything else is in customer service and you got this one medical job that you only worked at for 2 weeks, and then you're going for a medical opportunity, then it probably will be in your best interest to include that position, but then also include like one little bullet or explanation as to why it was short-lived. So it may be something that you did it while you were in college, or maybe you did it while you were on summer break, or, you know, or whatever the case, right? But if it's relevant, you know, then weigh your options of, does the time frame on here, if me taking it away, would that make me less qualified? You know, do I meet the qualifications otherwise by leaving this here? So it really, a lot of the answers that I have, it just depends because everybody's situation is different. But the first thing that you think about is this relevant? Does this support my candidacy for this job? If I take it away, will I no longer be qualified? And then that's your answer. And then if I have to put a short-lived position on my resume, can I add a little one-liner explaining why I stayed at that job for this short? It could be the death of a family member. It could be that, it was something that you were doing part-time or you were in school, whatever that reason is, you can try to incorporate that into your resume, and then also backing it up in your cover letter as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Okay, you guys asked some really good questions. I appreciate you for having me today.
Thank you for coming. I think I can end it here.